Islam is a set of fantasy ideas, claims,
Why don't you preach about
not.
Christianity?
Well, why don't you listen to what I'm talking about right
You're
now?
talking about Islam.
Do you have a problem?
No, I don't have a problem.
Good, thank you. Good
I
to
want to learn
know.
about Christianity.
Good to know. Thank you.
I want to learn
You
about
weren't paying attention when I was speaking about Jesus Christ, were you? I said Jesus Christ is historical. The claims of Jesus Christ are very much historical, and therefore
Written
I
by
am.
Paul.
Wait, what's wrong with Paul?
Who is Paul?
Well, Paul was a student of Gamaliel, someone who knew the law, who lived in the first century, and who was a disciple
a
of.
disciple of God, of Jesus?
That's right. Yeah, he was.
So where was he when the Romans or the Jews, they were trying to kill Jesus?
Well, how does that matter to us now?
No, I want to know. It doesn't matter.
I don't know where he
You
was
don't
at
know.
that time.
Was he a follower of a Jesus at the same time as well? When the Jesus was alive on this planet?
When
Was the
Jesus
Paul-
was, no, not
the
at that
Paul-
time.
No.
Not at that time.
Was he against Jesus?
Not at that time.
Not at that time means what?
When Jesus was on the face of the earth moving around,
Yeah.
Paul was neither against nor for.
So he was not against the Jesus.
Not at that time.
Not at that time.
Not at that time.
But did he become?
Later
become-
on.
Later on. And
Yes.
Why did he become against Jesus?
Because he was a religious Jew.
Paul.
Yes, he was a religious
Do
Jew.
you know what was this job? Paul's job.
Now, what are you trying? Are you trying to learn about Christianity?
I have a questions which I wanted to ask.
Okay. Now I can give you my email address. You
No,
can
I
email.
can't use internet.
All right. You can't use internet. Okay. So if you want to learn about Jesus Christ and Christianity,
First, let's talk about Paul. No?
if you want to learn about Paul, when last did you pick up the Bible to read?
I don't read the Bible.
What do you want me to do about his questions? He doesn't want to read the Bible.
I'm a Muslim. I don't.
I'm not saying I do not want to read the Bible. I said I have never read the Bible.
Okay. So you want to know about Paul?
You know this guy.
You want to know about Paul?
What are you gonna get from this? He's mu'anid. He's not gonna listen. He's like, it's probably
You need to pick up your Bible
I don't have a
listen to
Bible.
this guy.
online. Use
Which Bible?
online. If you do BibleGateway.com,
Is
you
there
can read the
different
Bible.
versions of a Bible or just one Bible?
Listen. Are you trying to learn? Are you trying to teach? What are you trying to do?
Can I know your name? So I will.
Arul.
Arul, I have a question to ask.
What is the broader question that you have?
I don't have
What's
a
your
broader
name?
question. I have a Ali.
Ali, okay.
I have a different questions.
Okay.
I have so many questions
Okay.
in my head.
Paul is
One of them is about the Paul because I was reading about the Paul. Actually, not reading. I was watching, and then the guy he was saying that the Paul was a bounty hunter, and he was in fact looking for.
Bounty.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You can say yes or no according to your knowledge. And he was actually after Jesus. He wanted to kill Jesus. Is that true?
No.
No. Okay. Fair enough. So he wasn't something like bounty hunter and wasn't up. Okay. Okay. Which Bible you were saying?
You can do BibleGateway.com, and there you have online Bible, so you can read. That one. So you can go there, and if you enter in the book of Acts, ACTS. No, just Acts. Sorry, ACTS.
How many books are there?
In the Bible, 66 books. So you can open that, and you can read the Acts or book of Acts. Yes, sorry.
No, 1 second.
Acts 1. So you can read from there. This will give you the first century history of Christians beginning from around the time Jesus ascended to heaven, after the crucifixion and resurrection.
Is this book, Acts, was it written or during the time of Jesus or after his death?
This one was after his death and resurrection.
Is there any book which is written during the time of his life in the world?
Well, likely Mark, Matthew, and John would have taken notes during the time of Jesus.
Likely.
Well, I don't know exactly what kinds of notes and so on they would have taken.
No,
All
like,
that I
like these Gospels of Matthew, Gospel of Luke, John, and what is the fourth one you say?
Matthew, Mark, Luke, John.
Yeah, they were the disciples.
Matthew,
as well.
Mark, and John were moving around with Jesus
Jesus.
Christ,
Yeah.
and
They were his
they were
disciples
his
as well.
students, disciples. So
Did they
there
write
is-
anything during the life of the Jesus?
yeah, they would
when
have.
he was alive, sorry.
They would have, yeah.
And it's
They
in
would
these
have.
Gospels.
That's how students work.
And it's in these Gospels.
Yeah, based on that, they were compiling the Gospels ultimately, yeah. Gospels were their witness accounts. You know, after Jesus was dead, and after he had risen back alive, and after he had ascended, over a period of time, these witnesses who were with Jesus, who were students of Jesus,
They wrote down the books.
they were now using raw material they would have already had. Now they were finishing up their works, and those were given to the church. Luke, as a historian, Luke is the only different book. He comes in as a historian, and he retrospectively comes in there, analyzes all available. But he's still in the first century.
Brother here.
What's
you know my brother here.
He's a lovely man.
I've got some questions to ask him. I was asking
So Luke comes in, he does his research, historical research, while still in the first century, so it's still all fresh. He does his research and puts together his book. The first part of the book is called the Gospel of Luke. The second part of the same book is what is called the Acts, Book of Acts. Because he was a historian who was around the time of Jesus. So Jesus had ascended just now, so it's all fresh, and the church is beginning to expand just now, so he's noting down everything.
Was there any church during the time of Jesus?
Was there any?
Church.
If you
Prayer hall. We can say a prayer hall to the church. Or
Yeah,
no?
we don't call I personally don't call a building a church. For me, church are the group of people.
What do you call a place where the Christians go?
For
and-
simplicity, we use the term church, but to
But
me,
is there
more
any-
accurately, church is the group of
The group of people who go and
themselves.
pray.
Yeah.
Okay, let's say this one. Is there any other name of that building instead of except church?
So in the first century in Jerusalem, they would have, of course, clearly used the temple, Jerusalem temple, to gather around. That's where they were, because these were still Jews it's just the next version, the next update is what they have, the New Testament from Jesus Christ.
The Christians, they follow Judaism as well or not?
The Christians, we take the Jewish text, history,
Old
the Torah.
Old Testament.
Yeah, of course.
You believe wholeheartedly in that as well?
Yeah, the history-wise, yes.
No, not
Theology-wise, yes. Only in terms of covenant, we have a new covenant on top. It's like saying, let's say you're working somewhere. Let's say in your workplace, the employer comes to you suddenly and says, "Oh, Ali, many things are changing in our workplace. We'd like to update your contract between you and us. Can we update our contract with you?" You say, "Okay, fine. If you're happy with them, and you see the new contract, you're still fine, and you work continually." Yeah? And that's how things were. There's a contract which was already in place with the Jews. When the church began, the very first church was Jewish, and now they have a new contract given by Jesus Christ himself. The contract is what we call testament or covenant. So when you hear the word New Testament, it's what is called a new contract.
And these people, these Luke, Matthew, these people, were they Jews as well? Or they were, what was
Matthew was Jewish, Mark was Jewish, John was Jewish.
all these four were Jews.
Luke, not sure, 50-50. There's an evidence to say maybe he wasn't. There's some indication.
Paul as well was Jewish.
Paul was a Jewish.
Is Paul a prophet as well or not?
Paul, well, in terms of the fact that he prophesies, he could be called a prophet. He has a few prophecies.
Is it written somewhere in the Bible that the Paul is a...
I can't remember off the top of my head, but he has prophecies. He has prophecies, and that will make him eligible. He has prophecies. He predicted a few things, and based on that, he could be called a prophet. Christians, yeah, we can legitimately call him a prophet, but his office is what is called an apostleship office, because that was his more prominent role as an apostle, as an official ambassador. Like ambassadors we have
Ambassador of what?
of Jesus Christ, like embassy.
How can he be an ambassador of Jesus when he did not believe on Jesus? That is
He
like-
initially did not. That only solidifies his case as an ambassador.
Okay, 1 second. did he believe in Jesus when Jesus was alive, or when he's gone up, then only he believed in Jesus?
So when Jesus was walking around the face of the earth,
And he was
we
preaching.
don't
Jesus was
preaching and so on. Paul wasn't around. We don't know what was going on with him. He might have been learning under Gamaliel at that time and so on. After Jesus had ascended, the church exploded in its growth, and that is where persecution began in Jerusalem, in Judea. There was massive persecution from religious Jews against these new Christians. The persecution, part of that persecution was Paul. Him being a religious Jew, he persecuted the church.
He was in that group who was persecuting the Christians.
It wasn't one unified group, but it was a movement, various things on. But later on, Paul met Jesus on the way to actually persecute more in Damascus, Jews in Damascus. On his road to Damascus, he met Jesus in person.
He met Jesus, or he had a dream about Jesus?
He met Jesus in person. He saw Jesus. He spoke to Jesus.
When he saw Jesus at that time, was Jesus alive? Was Jesus on this
He had
earth?
already ascended. Jesus had ascended. He
So
was
he
in
saw
heaven.
him as a God.
Exactly. He saw Jesus. He spoke to Jesus. He was blinded by Jesus. And then Jesus asked him to follow a particular thing for him to be healed. Another disciple came to pray for him, and he was healed. So saw, spoke to, and then was also healed by Jesus. And then he was also at the time of this meeting, there were other people who were around him who were also witnesses, and then you have the other apostles of Jesus attesting to Paul, attesting and saying what he is teaching is consistent with what we have heard from Jesus. It is not just consistent with what we have heard from Jesus, but also consistent with what we know from the Tanakh, the Torah, and everything else from the past Hebrew scriptures. On the basis of all of these testimonies is the veracity, or is the authenticity of what Paul preaches. And all that Paul said could actually be even gleaned from what Jesus himself preached. In other words, many times Muslims would go around claiming Paul introduced Christianity. It's not true. Not true at all. All that Paul said, all the theological aspects that Paul said could actually be gleaned by what Jesus said, and even what came even before that. In other words, he didn't say anything new in that sense. He didn't contradict, or he didn't introduce something which wasn't indicated earlier on. So, Christian doctrine is very solid, Ali. Christian historicity very solid. Islam, on the other hand, is in very terrible shape.
Why do you say this?
Because Islam, maybe I'll give you my email address, we can talk a bit more later on also.
For certain
But
reasons.
long story short, a simple point is, most of what is followed as Islam today comes not from the early centuries of Islam.
It comes from
Later writings, number one. Number two, from the early...
When you say it comes from the later writings, what do you mean later writings?
The hadith sources.
Hadith.
The hadith sources are later writings. Seerah literature, later writings. When I say later, I'm talking about centuries later. Seerah literature, centuries
Does
later.
it make any difference?
It does. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you.
Let me
Go
say
on.
one thing.
Yeah, sure.
Because the hadith which we believe on, it has a narration of a chain. You know what I mean? So I heard this hadith, for example, from you. You heard from this guy, and this guy has heard from the Prophet. So it has a chain. Does it not quite similar to what you said, that the Matthew and Luke, they were with the Jesus, and they wrote down the Gospels after the death of Jesus?
Good question.
Does
But
it make sense?
I hear your question.
You understand what I'm trying to say?
I clearly understand what you're saying. This is where I'm going to speak about some specific details, and then you will see these are oceans apart from each other. Yeah, oceans apart from each other. In the case of the testimonies of the disciples of Jesus, bear in mind they were writing while the contemporaries of Jesus were still alive. These were first century witnesses. I agree with you that the books were completed after Jesus had ascended, but if you're talking about seeing someone die, and seeing someone alive, you would remember that for the rest of your life. Now,
From the same thing. Point.
this is very important. Can I please complete this? And
Because
okay, go
I'll
on.
forget about
Yeah,
otherwise
sure.
what I was about to ask. So the Prophet had a companion called Abu Huraira. So there are certain hadiths in the book of hadith now. It says,
Yeah,
says-
Jason, good to
says-
see you. Yeah. God's blessings, brother. Please, I'll catch up with you in a bit.
it says in the hadith that the Prophet, peace be upon him, said this, according to Abu Huraira.
Yeah.
For instance, let's put in the Christianity. So the Luke is saying that Jesus has said something, this. Who's a witness? Luke. And he wrote it down in the book. Sahih Bukhari or Muslim, they have written down on hadith, compiled the book, and they have given you the evidence, not the evidence, a narration, which goes back to the Prophet. That who was there when the Prophet was saying certain things. For example, Abu Huraira or his wife Aisha or the daughter Fatima. So they were there.
Yeah.
And we believe in these things.
Yeah. So let me. I hear what you're saying. It's essentially you're just clarifying what you said earlier.
Yeah.
But still, when I explain what I'm trying to explain right now, you would see the Christian case is ocean apart from the Islamic case. I'll explain. Give me just 2 minutes or 3 minutes, please. In the case of the Christian writings, the writings were being produced in the first generation. The same generation that is very important.
Those who have seen Jesus.
What's that?
The generation who has seen the Jesus.
Exactly. They themselves were writing, but more importantly, they were writing whilst the others were still around. The persecutors were still around. The followers were still around, and so on. So in other words, it would have been widely scrutinized, because every person who is eligible to scrutinize was still there. Yeah. But when it comes to Islam, think about this carefully. You are told, for a moment, if we talk about Sahih al-Bukhari, the reality is, Islam tells us Sahih al-Bukhari was written about 220 years after the death of Muhammad. Yeah, that's what we are told. But manuscriptal evidence-wise, the first available manuscript for Sahih al-Bukhari comes from centuries later. So we have no way of knowing if Sahih al-Bukhari was in wide circulation during the 3rd century. But let me finish. During the 3rd century. So that's a huge question mark. So if I were to approach this as a good quality historian, I would say, well, you know what, I should really date Sahih al-Bukhari in terms of reliability only to centuries later, 10 centuries later, because I don't even know if it was written or circulated during the 3rd century after Muhammad was dead. I don't even know. So sticking to history, that's what I should do. But if I am extremely generous to the Muslims, extremely generous, and say, okay, maybe I'll take your word for it. So let's assume, even though we don't have manuscriptal evidence, let's assume it was written 220 years after Muhammad passed away. Okay, fine. We come there. Now, for the people who were around him at that time, and for himself, what is the source of information? He is saying there is a chain. But the problem is, the very reason he goes to a chain is because, this is where you need to think about this a bit intelligently. The very reason why he needs to talk about a chain is because Abu Huraira is still not around, clearly. Yeah? If Abu Huraira was still around, it's not a chain anymore. In other words, the very reason he's talking about a chain is because he doesn't have first-hand information. Yeah, with me? So far with me? Now, from our point of view, or from the people around Sahih Bukhari, people around Bukhari's point of view, they think, okay, how did you produce your book? Where did you get information from? Now, he says, oh, I went and spoke to this guy. This guy said that he learned under some other guy. That guy said he learned under some other guy. I heard them say that. Now, clearly, Sahih al-Bukhari didn't meet them. Clearly. Sahih al-Bukhari met only the last guy. So the point is,
these people, they have written down the hadith.
No, that's where I'm saying. Yeah, go on.
They have written down the hadith, the Bukhari and the Muslim, they have compiled in a book, like the Quran.
Ali, that's not true. I hear what you're saying.
You can say that's not true, obviously.
Ali,
You say this.
Ali, I hear what you're saying, but the reality is this. The reality is this. You understand the word canonical. Like I said, as a unbiased historian, I will have problems even dating Sahih al-Bukhari to the 3rd century as an unbiased historian. But if I were to accept, let me finish,
They were
please.
the companions.
Ali, one second. If I were to be extremely generous, not as a historian, but just as a person who want to be friendly with Muslims, and say I'm extremely generous, you are saying 3rd century after Muhammad. I'm willing to say okay. I'm extremely generous and I'm coming there.
I have a question. 1 second.
Okay, sure.
So are you saying after the death of the Muhammad or during the life of the Muhammad, no one has written down what he used to say?
What I am going to say is, I don't have a clue. No Muslim would have a clue today as to what was written down, because we simply do not have access to any of them. We don't have. Whether they were written down or not is completely oblivious to us. We can make no judgment about that at all. Now, but on top of that, there are multiple problems. If this is where the problem stops, then at least you can say, okay, Muslims, maybe they forgot to write it down or whatever else, So, but maybe they have a case. But the problem is this. But we have earlier artifacts from Islamic regions, not hadith sources. I'm talking about other sources of information like writings, inscriptions on rocks, coins that early Islamic rulers produced, and so on. We have other artifacts, and when we put them together, they seem to contradict what the hadiths are saying. So then we have a problem. Wait a second, you are late. I don't have a mechanism to figure out if you're telling the truth. If you could have known the truth, if those guys are reliable at all, the one you went to speak to, the one you claim you went and spoke to,
narrations.
China, then I don't even know who you met. I don't know. I have no. But even if no one, at least if no one else contradicted, I would have said, oh, maybe okay, go away. But others are contradicting, so I have serious problems with you. It doesn't even stop there. He himself contradicts his own work. Sahih al-Bukhari has contradictory hadiths. So clearly, but Sahih al-Bukhari, today there are people who go around saying, oh, today we have a good mechanism to classify which hadiths in Sahih al-Bukhari are reliable, Daif, Hassan.
No. There is a difference. Hadith and Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih al-Muslim, Muslims, they believe on these hadiths. But then there are some hadiths which are not Sahih. Sahih means, you know what a Sahih means.
I know. But what I'm not talking about the other books right now.
Yeah.
What I'm talking about is
within the books of
exactly,
Muslim and Bukhari.
Exactly. Sahih al-Bukhari itself today are being assessed hadith by hadith for individual qualification. Individually, they are being given ranking, or not ranking, but grading. The problem is this: when Sahih al-Bukhari produced his book, he didn't have that in mind. In his mind, he assessed, and in his evaluation, the criteria he had, a good memory and whatever else and so on.
Can you tell me, for example, what are the contradictions in Bukhari?
Okay, I'll give you a simple example. Sahih al-Bukhari in one place actually says, by the time Muhammad passed away, there was a Quran already. Yeah, so he says that in one place. In another place, no, there was no such Quran. The very first Quran was put together by Abu Bakr. That's the very first Quran put together. Before that, Quran was in one book.
Yeah, it wasn't compiled as a book.
Yeah,
that's what you mean.
I mean the same in both places.
Yeah, we believe it.
No, I mean the
life of the Prophet, peace be upon him, the book was not, the Quran as a book which we have right now, it was not compiled as in a book.
Yeah.
It was written on the rocks or on the leather.
I know, but I'm talking about the same thing, Ali. I am saying Sahih al-Bukhari in one place, he says it was actually compiled as one book.
Can you please show me?
Yeah, sure.
Tell me, I'll check it out on a phone.
Absolutely. So,
then the question I want to ask this question from the Muslims as well,
Absolutely.
If there's a contradiction or not.
No, absolutely, you should.
1,000 years' time. Exactly. So, don't you think they were monkeys? People believe in change species. I'm not even saying that.
Yeah. So Sahih al-Bukhari 5019. According to Sunnah.com.
Hang on. I'm saying, what's the bigger transition? You monkeys. Sahih al-Bukhari?
5019.
I think he's a good point, actually. Sunnah.com.
Yeah.
What's the bigger transition? What's the bigger transition? Monkeys to the was that narrated by Abdulaziz bin Rufai?
That's right, yeah.
Where's that? Okay.
Yeah, the same one.
This one, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I entered upon him the verse. So did the Prophet leave anything beside the Quran? He replied he did not leave anything except what is between the two bindings of the Quran. Then we visited Muhammad bin Hanafiya and asked him the same question. He replied he did not leave except what is between the bindings of the Quran. Okay?
Yeah, so clearly it's even describing the book as two bindings. So we're talking about a compiled work. So he says this in one place.
Okay.
So clearly, as you might know, in another place he says during Abu Bakr's time.
Where is the other one? That's what I want to know.
The Abu Bakr's one is
Bukhari as well?
yeah, same Sahih Bukhari 4986. 4986.
This one?
Yep. Yep.
No, the warrior, no. But after they take the money, they worry a lot.
Now this is during the time of battle.
Yeah, Abu Bakr. This is after the time of Muhammad. Abu Bakr, the concern they are addressing is we don't have a Quran. And Zayd bin Thabit is even essentially not happy with the attempt to put together the Quran. He's saying, well, why do you want me to do this? It wasn't done during the time of Prophet. Why do you want me to do this? Hey, how are you doing? Oh, Shaitan. Oh, I see. Okay. All right. Okay.
Yeah, he said here. He said, yeah, will you do anything which the Prophet never did actually? Means combining the Quran.
Yeah, so there was no Quran. They were really hesitant to put together a Quran. Because they are saying this didn't happen before during the time of Muhammad. Why should we do now?
Yeah, it says here, I started to get from the people who knew it by heart or written on the stones.
Yeah. So another thing is, it's also, so clearly Sahih al-Bukhari is contradicting himself.
Okay. I want to write it down.
Sure.
What was the first verse? Sorry.
4985.
Five something.
5019 is the first one. 5019.
5019 Sahih Muslim, huh?
No, Sahih al-Bukhari. Same as Sahih al-Bukhari, yeah.
And the other one is?
Sahih al-Bukhari 4986.
Yeah, I want to ask this one because I didn't know this thing.
Sure. So that, and the other thing is, if you read 4986 carefully when you go home, clearly there is no one person who had memorized all of the Quran. You know, today Muslims would think, but there were plenty of people who had memorized all of the Quran. If we show errors in the Quran or variations in the Quran.
4986, you mean?
Yeah.
But in the 4986, it says that they were the people. There was a war, a lot of people died in the war who knew the Quran by heart.
Catholics are worse.
And that's why the Umar ibn Khattab told to Abu Bakr, it's good to compile the Quran, because you never know, tomorrow we'll lose all the rest of the people who lost.
Here are the problems, Ali. Sahih al-Bukhari also tells us I don't know if you know, there are 4 specific people who are named as the best of the reciters of the Quran. Best of the people.
Best reciters of the Quran.
The best of the people when it comes to Quran. Maybe I'll deal with that another day actually.
Okay.
So maybe we'll
now.
Yeah, I need to leave right now. But
We'll speak next week.
speak next week. Please check this out.
Let's talk in a decent way the way we're talking now.
This, you know how things happen at Speaker's Corner. When I'm
But
speaking
if you'll be decent, others will be decent. I don't think so. There will be
I
fight.
don't think, Ali.
Now you ask questions the way you're asking me.
Ali,
I told you I don't know. I'll
Ali.
ask from someone who has more knowledge than me.
Ali, I'm telling you, I've been here for many, many years. And I'm seeing these things also happen in the last few months and so on. You saw the guy who came behind me just now, for a few minutes ago. Did you see him? Saying shaitan, shaitan. Yeah,
Please.
but so he doesn't care what question was asked.
No, you have to ask him. You have to
No,
ask
but no.
Tell him, come here. I have certain question about Islam.
Ali, no.
If you have a question about... Like
Ali,
I
no.
came to you and I
No.
told you, look, I have a question about
Yeah?
your religion. You asked me, what do you want to learn? I said, no,
I know.
I have a lot of questions.
I know, Ali.
And I
But
still got a lot of
just
questions.
imagine you're standing there and I come here and I say, you are shaitan. Why should I even speak to you?
I don't know, you probably have seen you
Well, I
shouting at
know,
others.
but the point is, it doesn't
I have
matter.
seen you shouting at others. Others have been shouting at you.
Yeah.
But that doesn't matter.
Every
I
time,
will see you the way you speak to me.
every time you see me shouting in itself is not the problem. No, I can be loud in my voice and communicate to others. But the problem is when I'm asking questions, instead of
upset.
giving
They
answers,
get upset.
if you are swearing at me or this and that and so on and abusing in different ways, then that's not good. I shout. It's Speaker's Corner. I shout because I want to speak to 100 people if I could. So shouting in itself, if he came here and he was shouting, I don't have a problem because it's Speaker's Corner. Maybe I think he's trying to speak to 100 people. But if he comes here and swears at me or calls me shaitan, I have a problem.
You can call him back, shaitan.
No, I wouldn't. My Lord Jesus Christ hasn't trained me to do that. My Lord Jesus Christ says love. No. Okay, we are finishing up now. My God and Lord Jesus Christ asked me to love my enemies.
But I tell you one more thing.
Yeah, go on.
We'll speak about this matter next week because
Sure.
there was a guy who was talking about the same thing.
Okay.
And then there are some words, as you said just now, the God said, love your enemy.
Yeah.
Then why did the God command to kill the enemies in the Bible?
That's a very good question asked.
We'll talk about next week.
Next week.
We need to explain properly. We need to talk
Absolutely.
properly.
Absolutely.
I want to ask about the hadith as well from some
Absolutely.
Muslims.
Absolutely.
And then let's see what they're going to give me an answer. And we'll
Good.
talk about next week.
Yeah. Try to find out and if
Without camera.
that's fine. Don't worry. Don't
Nice
worry.
to meet you.
Great to
Arul.
catch up, Ali. God's blessings. See you around. Yeah. See you around. Okay. See you around. All right. So of course we were talking about the fact of hadiths contradicting. Sahih al-Bukhari, the same hadith source contradicting itself in 2 different places. Anyway, we had a wonderful discussion on how the Bible is very reliable, details of how the Bible was put together and so on. So with that we are wrapping up for the day. A bit tired, but through God's grace.